everybody. Welcome aboard to the Sports Talk Nation. Michael Cohen here with you. We got a lot to discuss this week. It's been a wild week in the National Football League as free agency is well underway and a lot of moves have been made. We'll go focus here on the Jets and the Giants, what has been, in some respects, at least to a lot of fans anyway, somewhat underwhelming in a lot of ways, for that matter. So let's go right into it. Before we get moving into this topic, folks, I just want to let you guys know that I jumped on a podcast earlier this week to talk about the NFL free agency, the draft, what's going on with the Jets as well, called Bump and Run. You can find it on Spotify, and it is hosted by Pete Colasano as well as Scott Bracey. I was on there this week. It is episode 8. Take a listen to that. I'm going to drop the link in the description below. Now let's just get right into this topic here with regards to the Jets, the Giants, free agency. And as I said, in some respects, underwhelming in a lot of ways as far as the free agency is concerned. From the Jets standpoint, here's a team that had, depending on how you want to measure it, the second or third most cap space coming into free agency, around $65 to $68 million in cap space. A lot of people had assumed the Jets would be very big players in free agency. This was a team that was 2-14. They need a lot of players. They don't have a lot going for them, for that matter, as far as the roster is concerned. So the thought was that this was going to be an offseason where Joe Douglas was going to go headfirst into free agency, and it did not turn out that way. I think from that standpoint, it was kind of disappointing for a lot of fans. A lot of people thought the Jets were going to be in on players, especially in the offensive line. Players like Joe Thuney, who ended up signing a 5-year, $80 million deal with the Kansas City Chiefs. Corey Linsley, a center who ended up signing, former center of the Green Bay Packers, ended up signing a long-term deal with the LA Chargers. And even from the pass rush standpoint, a lot of people had the Jets linked to Yannick Ngakoue, who is one of the premier pass rushers in the NFL. He ends up taking a 2-year, $26 million deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. So the Jets instead decided to go a much cheaper route and going towards the second, third-tier guys and really allow players that are not going to jump off the page, if you will, if you are a Jets fan. And we're talking about, when you take a look at the guys they brought in, wide receiver Keelan Cole, only a 1-year deal, $5.5 million. Jared Davis, who was mostly a bench guy with the Detroit Lions, a linebacker. Justin Hardy is an interesting pickup, a special teamer. He is a gunner. You always need those. That's a solid pickup from the Saints. And LaMarcus Joyner, who was mostly a backup safety / nickel corner from the Raiders. Mostly depth pieces. Even Dan Feeney, a depth piece on the offensive line. There's not a lot of guys that are going to jump out there and say, oh yeah, this guy is going to be a definite starter and going to be a major part of a turnaround for the New York Jets. Can't say that. The two big moves made by the Jets, obviously, were Corey Davis and Carl Lawson. When you take a look at someone, let's just start with Carl Lawson for that matter. To me, Carl Lawson is the prototypical analytics player. This is a guy who was last year involved in 58 disruptions, was ranked 14th in the league as far as getting pressure to the quarterback, is considered one of the better linebackers, outside linebackers, at getting pressure at the quarterback, but only had 5.5 sacks last year. Also a player who has had a bit of an injury history last couple of years. Only played in 7 games in 2018, only played in 12 games, 2 starts in 2019, had a lot of injuries. Last season was his real first full season and really got the most opportunity to start games. Made 11 starts, played in all 16 games, and had those 5.5 sacks. Of course, his rookie year was tremendous. He had 8.5 sacks that year. So the Jets are getting a player who is still very young at 26. So they're really betting on the potential more than anything else with Carl Lawson, for that matter. Will work out. We'll have to wait and see. He's an intriguing piece. Of course, in Robert Saleh's defense, a defense that's predicated on pressure, he could be a good addition. Hence, Lawson is a guy with a lot of upside. The other big addition, of course, Corey Davis, and a lot of people, including myself, have been discussing this wide receiver situation with the New York Jets and the free agents that were out there. There were a lot of free agents, but the one thing that has been very apparent in this free agency is that the wide receiver market isn't that great. And we've already seen some big names like Juju Smith-Schuster sign only a one-year deal with Pittsburgh to go back there. Will Fuller signing a one-year contract with the Miami Dolphins. Really, only other than Davis, Curtis Samuel got a three-year deal with the Washington football team. Again, another situation where the Jets are taking the bet on a player who, in Davis, Corey Davis, formerly of the Tennessee Titans, was not a number one receiver. Had a really good year last year. Had, if you take a look at the numbers, 65 receptions, 984 yards, receiving 15.1 yards per catch, and 5 touchdowns. Very good numbers. Also, a catch percentage of about 71%. Very, very good numbers. Keep in mind, he was also the number 2 guy behind a guy like A.J. Brown, who was going to generate a lot of double teams, and also a Tennessee Titans team that has Derrick Henry in the backfield, where the defenses are going to bring up a safety. So you had a lot of single coverage for that matter last year. The couple of years before that had struggled in 2019, only 601 yards receiving, had some injuries that year. Had a good year in 2018, 891 yards receiving, but his rookie year, underwhelming, 375. Didn't really live up to being a first-round pick with Tennessee, when you take a look at the long and short of it. Again, the Jets are hoping that he can become a top-flight receiver. And trust me, I think Davis could be a very good player. He has the good size, 6'3", perfect size for a receiver. He's very physical. He has a lot of good traits that you look for and like in big receivers. The question is, can he now put it together as the big guy for the Jets now? That's the big question. I would have liked to have seen the Jets going out there and got a Juju Smith-Schuster. And again, if you take a look just on, this is where I really think that Joe Douglas did a lot of his work, was comparing players, doing a lot of analytics to try to make these moves. Juju Smith-Schuster hasn't had that really big year in a couple of years. Didn't have a big year last year. 3 years ago, had a 1,400-yard season as a receiver. Some people have said he's a classic slot guy. I would have liked to have seen the Jets get him because he would have been a very solid addition, a very good piece to this offense, and I think he would have even made the signing of Davis even better for that matter, because for a lot of people, and even the Steelers, look at Smith-Schuster as a number one receiver, even though he comes out of the slot. So I thought that would have been a very good addition. The Jets decide not to go that route. Schuster goes back to Pittsburgh. I don't know how deep into negotiations the Jets were with him, but they had, if you believe reports, have made contact with him. He goes back to Pittsburgh for a year on $8 million. The Jets essentially give Corey Davis $27 million guaranteed to become what they hope will be a number one receiver. We'll see if that works out. We'll see. It's a gamble. It really is a gamble. Regardless, when you take a look at this team, keep in mind, you still have Denzel Mims on this roster, who we still have to wait and see whether he's going to have a big year this year. Showed signs last year as a rookie, but what's he going to be? Is he going to have a big year in 2021 and become that number one guy? We'll wait and see. So there's a lot of it's potential that the Jets are betting on, but it's a very risky potential for that matter. I again would have liked to have seen the Jets be a little more aggressive. I wouldn't have minded if that's the thing that it's not just Smith-Schuster. It's also the fact that you had Will Fuller out there, the fact that you had guys like Curtis Samuel out there, and even Kevin Golladay, who's still available. Probably not going to get a big deal. We'll talk about him with the Giants in just a minute. I know the Giants have been pursuing him. Nothing has come out of that so far. But you would have liked to see them just be a little more aggressive in that department, really overall in free agency for that matter. But this is the thing about Joe Douglas. He's not about free agency. He is a guy who likes to build through the draft, and that's why when you take a look what the Jets did this free agency, now it makes everything the Jets do in the draft that much more important. Douglas now has to hit on all his picks, or majority of his picks for that matter. And you take a look at the draft last year, nailed it on the first pick with Mekhi Becton. Rest of the draft, okay, we have to still wait and see how that turns out over a long period of time. But the Jets still have problems at edge rusher. They still have a lot of problems at corner. They still have problems in the offensive line. They didn't, and that's the thing that really bugs me, is that they didn't really address offensive line and corner much at all in this free agency period. I thought they should have done that a little more aggressively. They got to address those positions in need. Tight end, they got to look into, and even receiver for that matter. Do they feel that there's another receiver out there that they can add to this receiving core and even running back? So there's a lot of pieces they need other than just the quarterback, and that goes back to my last video when I was discussing whether they should stick with Sam Darnold, go with Zach Wilson. And I'll be honest with you, you take a look at where the Jets are right now. A lot of people have said the Jets are better than they were a week ago. I don't know if they really are, because you take a look at the division. The Patriots had a huge spending spree, adding Jonnu Smith, adding Hunter Henry, adding Nelson Aguilar at wide receiver, bringing in Matthew Judon, who's a very good pass rusher, formerly the Ravens. The Patriots loaded up. And, I mean, if you match the Patriots with the Jets right now, it's no contest. The Patriots are going to knock the Jets off, knock the Jets around, as they normally do. Everybody in the division got better, so I can't sit here and say that the Jets are a better team. They're still the fourth team in this division. They're still a 4, 5, 6 win team at best. And that's why when you take a look at this draft, it doesn't matter to me who the quarterback is, whether it's Sam Darnold, whether it's Zach Wilson, unless the Jets can get some help on the offensive line and improve what has been outside of the left tackle a bad group on the offensive line. Their quarterback doesn't have a chance. It's just the facts. Doesn't have a chance. Speaking of the quarterback situation, that continues to develop. Sam Darnold, the Jets have been trying to shop him. They've made it obvious they're willing to take calls and listen in. And so far, no one has taken a bite for Sam Darnold. Everybody seems to be going out there and getting their quarterback on short-term deals. The Chicago Bears answered their quarterback problem, sort of, going out and getting Andy Dalton on a one-year deal. The Patriots, of course, bring back Cam Newton. All these teams that had a need for quarterback, even the Texans, who don't know what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson, whether it be with his off-field issues over the sexual harassment allegations or via trade, went out there and got Tyrod Taylor to potentially be their starting quarterback this year. Carson Wentz, of course, going to Indianapolis. So there's not many spots left for Darnold to go in. Even the Washington football team said, we're not interested. And they had just brought in another former Jet quarterback, Ryan Fitzpatrick, on a one-year deal to be their guy, potentially for this year, unless they go out there and draft somebody. So where are the Jets going to send Sam Darnold if they're really going to trade him is now the question. They're running out of places, for that matter. The Seattle Seahawks could be a potential landing spot. I know we saw the story last week that Pete Carroll was giving a lot of praise to Sam Darnold, saying that he is a guy who has a big arm and has potential to be coming into his own at some point soon. Would the Seahawks be a landing spot should they trade Russell Wilson, who has been disgruntled with the offensive line play in Seattle? That's still on the table. Now, do I see basically a Darnold for Wilson swap? No, it's not happening. I don't see Russell Wilson wanting to come to the Jets. Plus, the Seahawks are in a bit of a bind. If they traded Russell Wilson now, they would be taking a huge cap hit of about $39 million. So they're better off waiting until June 1st before they even make a move on him. So that's where it puts the Jets in a very interesting spot going into the draft. What are they going to do? Do you keep Sam Darnold and trade the pick, trade down, get more picks, and potentially get more players, and stick with Sam Darnold for another year? I know that's not very popular for a lot of fans, but that's out there. Or do you just bite the bullet, draft Zach Wilson, and try to figure out with Sam Darnold later in that draft and try to unload him then? So this is why it's going to be a fascinating draft for the New York Jets from that standpoint. And again, I can't emphasize enough, as I just said before, the lack of improvement on the offensive line doesn't matter who the quarterback is. It doesn't matter. It's going to be rough. It's going to be rough for the Jets this year in 2021, but that's what we would have expected anyway, as the Jets continue to be in this proverbial rebuild, for that matter. Even the Giants, for that matter, had a tough time. Let's just go over to them very quickly. Had a tough time going out there and getting a lot of impact players because they didn't have a lot of cap space. They had like $5 million in cap space, and they had to restructure some contracts like Nate Soldier just to get about $8 million in cap space. So not a lot of big moves there. They have been linked to Kenny Galladay for a while, but nothing has really come of it. Galladay is still kind of going around, trying to find a way to get a contract, get a big deal. He's probably not going to get the big long-term deal that he would like, which has been the case with a lot of receivers this offseason. Moves that the Giants did make, again, Leonard Williams probably being the biggest move, giving him an extension, a 3-year, $63 million deal with $45 million guaranteed. That's a lot of money. For a guy who had that one big year, the breakout year last year with Big Blue. And Kyle Rudolph, an interesting signing at tight end, who was a pretty good possession receiving tight end with the Vikings over the years. That's really all the really notable moves the Giants made. I mean, you want to go crazy about Mike Glennon being the backup now to Daniel Jones. Okay. But the Giants didn't do a whole heck of a lot to improve in free agency their football team, as they, too, need to rely on the draft to fill out spots. And David Gettleman, who has gotten a lot of things wrong over the years, has to get it right this year for Big Blue. That's where we stand here in free agency. If anything does change, any other additions come up that are significant, we're going to bring it here to you. Obviously, we're getting closer and closer and closer to the NFL draft, and that is going to be one heck of a night. We'll see what the Jets are going to do with that quarterback position. That's going to be something to watch. Now, folks, remember, follow us on the social media at OpenMicNJ on Twitter, Facebook.com/OpenMicProgram. Remember, like and subscribe right here to the Sports Talk Nation. We'll talk to you next time.